for those
Let's
of you
get going.
early bots here. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm John Miglosh for the WDMA. We've got a humdinger. We got one of the best articles I've read in, I don't know, maybe this year. It's by Mindset-Tarran from Gunderson Direct, and it'll give you insights into why direct marketing is a can't lose strategy. Long term, it is the way to go. And we'll have some fun before that. So let's get back to the fun. And here we go. This is a Heineken commercial from a couple of years ago. The lady's just getting out of a cab and she's unloading and puts the turkey on the roof. And you can imagine it's about funny things that happen during the holidays and how that's how you embrace the holidays. Don't fight it. Just go with it. Here we go.
I didn't mean to be a fool for you.
Whoopsie.
I didn't mean to
Now
leave you, but I do.
The husband burns the roast.
I only wanted to have some fun.
And he gets a
then do it all again
takeout
with
meal.
someone new.
And they all get burgers.
But accident,
This guy was trying to light the fireworks and they didn't go off, but now they did. Nobody cares anymore. And there's the cabbie. And he's driving along with the turkey on the roof, but not for long probably. Anyway, some of the old ones are better, I gotta say. So let's get down to business now. Let's get down to business, okay? So InBev seems to be eliminating the U.S. CMO role. I mean, do we really care? No, but it just shows you where the power is, right? I've been talking about this for years. When you're if you get to be CMO, you'll find out that the people who control the money control the CMO, and they don't really think of you as necessary, except as a commodity to do some creativity, throw some creativity in now and then, but don't throw too much in. That's the mistake here. If you get too creative, if we get too wild and crazy, you know what? It costs us a lot of money. Marketing can cost money. I think Bud Light found that out. And so they're flattening out Chief Commercial Officer Kyle Norrington will be overseeing the marketing. What CCO is, I've never heard of that before. But, anything but a CMO. And some other guys, Chief Sales Officer guys, I emphasize, Simon Wustenberg, that's a nice name. High-end Business Unit President Andy Thomas will now be reporting directly to the CEO. So they have a couple of people that are going to share the responsibility of CMO. That's gone. And they're going to talk to Brendan Whitworth to reduce layers within the organization, okay? Bud's come out big. More support for the NFL and college football, the official beer partner of the UFC, Woot, woot, woot. We're real men at Budweiser, except who drink Bud Light? I was trying to think of what the official beer of WDMA should be. If I had my pick, it'd probably be Leinenkugel's. Leinie's Red, one of my very favorites. I like Yuengling, but it's in Pennsylvania, and I don't think we have any members in Pennsylvania, so it's not going to be Yuengling. And so good beer. I like Point also, but when I remember a billboard from back in the 70s, as I was leaving Point, it said, Stevens Point, Wisconsin, it said, when you're out of Point, you're out of town, and it was for Point beer. Meanwhile, Alyssa Heinerscheid, who apparently was behind the move to dump the funny old frat boy persona of Bud Light, hasn't been heard of. She says that her Bud Light role on her LinkedIn page, we were connected before the debacle. We were actually connected on LinkedIn. I don't remember seeing her lately. I'll look her up. I'll send her a connection since I'm mentioning her here. And Daniel Blake, apparently they're on permanent or temporary leave, temporary that may become permanent. This was a really interesting story from The Hustle, Juliet Bennett Ryla, and we've done a few of her stories. An AI experiment made a surprisingly pleasant Twitter. So they took 500 chatbots and they put them in a sort of a Twitter-like environment. Now the scary part about that is that it does, sometimes those test environments don't scale. For example, a city, I think it was Sacramento, California, experimented with rent benefits, rent assistance. And they did it for like 50 people and it worked really well. It kept them in their apartments and it got them back on their feet and they got off of it in a while and they watched it very carefully. Then they did 500 and I think it still worked well. But when they did it to like 5,000, then the landlords figured it out and raised the rents and completely offset the rent assistance program and ended up making rents less affordable for the people who didn't get the benefits, and so made the whole thing more unfriendly to renters than it had been before the city got involved with messing around with it. So not every project scales. One of the things they did, and this has been going on for literally decades, where developers and scientists have built simulations. And before that, look up the Mouse Utopia if you want to hear about a great simulation. They built a perfect mouse environment to see what would happen. And it could have held 6,000 mice in this little mice city, always fresh lettuce, always fresh bedding, always nice food. And it topped out at, I think, about 300 mice. And they stopped breeding and they started eating each other. And Utopia can be a dangerous place. Anyway, so the shtick here was that they built a simulation with individual personas. So one bot might have been Black Lives Matter beneficiary or giver or something. Another might have been a Trump supporter, and they had a whole mix, 500 different personas. And they built 4 different, Peter Thornburg, the lead scientist, built 500 different personas, and then he used 4 different major algorithms: the echo chamber, the discover, the bridging algorithm. There was one other one. The echo chamber, the bots only saw tweets from similar bots, and they would retweet them, but they wouldn't comment very much. And everybody was happy, but it was fairly quiet. The discover it took the most popular feeds, the ones with the most likes, and it saw a high but often negative engagement. Right. They were sending the ones you disagreed with most over to you. And then they had another one called the bridging algorithm, which showed bots posts with the most likes, but only from bots with the opposite political point of view. This Twitter also saw high engagement, but the divergent bots often found common ground, And for those of you who don't like Twitter as much anymore, I got up to over 4,000 followers on Twitter when I was diligent about it. And so I was fairly into Twitter for a while, but I just rarely saw opinions I agreed with ever. And now it's a little more balanced. I regularly, if I look in the comments, I'll see disagreements. I'll see other points raised. I will see agreement because I only follow people I basically agree with. I have a fun Twitter. It's you can probably figure it out if you want to. But I do keep my business Twitter because Mark Ritson and others, you can DM them easier than they'll talk on LinkedIn. And Mark Ritson, to his credit, I guess, I tried to say nice things about him. He's really taught me more about marketing than anything else I've done, except for direct marketing testing, which we're getting to. But he actually liked my yesterday's post, which was great. And I connected with a bunch of really, really big names that he'd mentioned in his article. And I'm just honored to be connected with those people. So I may not contribute, but at least I'm connected. Okay, and here's the backstory from Adam Rogers, and it's really worth reading because it tells you the personas and it tells you all that's going on, and it tells you some of the history of this AI type simulation testing. And the real point I wanted to make, which I haven't yet, was that part of the fun, if you don't think AI can take over your job, here's how it can take over your job. Let's say you're really creative. Let's say you write creative headlines, creative copy, and all that. The most creative things that you can do as a human, right? And you know what humans like, and you know how to sell to humans. So that's your job, and you're well paid for that. So now I'm going to take AI, and I'm going to do 100 headlines for something, for selling soap. And you're going to give me 10 or 5. And I take that 100 and I run it through some kind of test simulation, or I just put it up on a social media platform with real humans, or mostly humans, or some humans anyway, and I see which one gets the most likes or clicks or whatever, and I take those top 10. Okay, now so far no real human has been involved. I haven't looked at it. I don't care, right? I take those 5 and then I do a real test. Maybe I even do it with direct mail. In other words, I can generate more garbage and I can winnow through more garbage with AI than I can waiting for you to come back with some ideas. You see that? I don't know. I hope you see it. Because that's where I'd go. If my life depended on creative and I didn't want to pay much for anybody, that's how I'd do it. And I got that from Scott Adams, who's the Dilbert creator. Very smart man. I'll tag him. Sometimes he DMs me back. But either way, I always enjoy his work. So here's the greatest. This is one of the greatest articles ever. We're going to give it a full 9 minutes. Because first of all, it has testing in the headline. How could you do better than that? Jeff knows my soul, right? This is about direct marketing. This is not about direct mail per se or creative per se. Okay? He says, as a rule, response to a creative execution deteriorates over time. Now, according to Ritson and other recent studies, like in mass media, TV commercials, for example, there is a halo effect that increases over time. And there is little deterioration except in the minds of the creatives who want to do a new commercial. So you have to be careful with this. And I think Jeff says that throughout a couple of times in here. Okay? But it doesn't necessarily deteriorate. It depends a little on if you have a moving parade. And oftentimes direct marketing is like that. Okay? So let's say you have a tree trimming business, right? And it really heats up if there's like a hurricane or something like that. Andrew Ettinger talks about this. Okay, he's got a client like this, and the tree trimming business puts out a postcard every month to about 20,000 people around New England, and then Sandy hit, and they call it superstorm, but it wasn't even a hurricane. It was just a tropical storm that got there on full moon, which made the tides rise and the surge, the whole thing just was it's also the planning of the subways in New York that don't expect it ever to be raining a lot. and they quit running, the pumps quit running when the water rises a little too high, and then it really rises. So, and everything drains downhill, so you're stuck. But anyway, all of that aside, the tree trimming business just did it to get in your head so that when you need tree trimming, when you need a tree cut out of your house that's fallen on it, you know where to go. Okay, it's the opposite of being there at the right time. It's the development of brand influence, long-term branding, long-term. When you need tree trimming, you'll call Acme Tree Trimming, whatever it is. When you need us, call us. And Andrew does a lot of HVAC also. I don't usually call HVAC people unless my furnace isn't working or my air conditioner or something else, And but I know who to call. There's a sticker on my furnace, right? And Andrew encourages that too. So that aside, always be testing. ABT creative strategy. That was the first thing I learned in direct mail from Vic Hunter, was always be testing. Okay, you always want to find a new creative, but you also want to find tweaks and and other things. Do you have a lift letter? You know what a lift letter is? Well, call me. If you want an hour of my time, join the WDMA, pay a little money, and we'll talk. Otherwise, we'll do 15 minutes. Happy to meet you. I love doing the 15-minute meetings, and they're always fun. And, just John at WDMA.org, or reach out to me on LinkedIn. You're more likely to have LinkedIn work. Happy to spend 15 minutes with you, or really look at your creative, and that takes a little bit more. But anyway, there's a lot of things that you can tweak. I gave a talk at one of the national DMA shows in New Orleans long ago on testing. What to test when the well runs dry. It's exactly the problem. And, send me your creative and we'll talk about what to test. But the good tests are not the obvious. Like I got this one a couple months ago, right? And I've talked about it. And there's a QR code, but there's no offer. Okay? That you don't need to test should you have an offer. You don't need to test should you have a response device. If there's no URL, no phone number, no address, return address, no nothing, right? It's not going to get responses. It may be effective as a branding tool, but it will not get responses. Oakley handed me there when I was working with USPS with Elena Neely, and we went into Oakley headquarters, and they handed me their mailing piece, and I said, "Well, there's no response device. How would I even order these?" "Oh, it's in the body copy here. There's the 800 number or whatever." I said, "No, that doesn't count." I've increased response 20, 30%. Just put it on there. Just make it big. Right? It's not hard. You don't need to test that stuff. You don't need to test the big things. You don't need to test the trivial things like moving whether bullet points has a star or a round button or something. Although Craig Huey does often mention things that I would think were pretty trivial. So part of what makes a good test is it's what do we already know that's obvious, and what isn't going to have enough impact to make a difference. And it's in that middle ground that the great tests happen. Okay? And so this is about how Gunderson Direct approaches testing. First, getting the thing opened, and that applies even if it's a catalog. Not so much with a postcard. It kind of works. Postcards are kind of always open. But test against a postcard, because like in South America, they don't trust the Postal Service. They don't like everybody knowing what you're offering them. Okay, and when we tested a number 10 in a number 10 envelope mailer with a letter instead of a postcard, it had 4 times the response that the postcard did. So it depends on the culture, right? Marketing timeliness is next to godliness. I don't know. That's a digital thing. We never believed we could hit the nail on the head. We wanted to create a long-term impression. We wanted to create compelling reason to make a decision now. But we didn't necessarily hope to get it there on the right day. Okay, that's not a thing. Not a thing in direct mail. So I don't worry too much about that, but it's good to tell them why you're writing. Okay, it's good to have an occasion. So I'm okay with seasonal mailings, with a holiday card or a Valentine's card if you're selling candy or something beforehand, or a Christmas in July, anything almost. I don't think they're very effective, but they're something to put on the outside of the envelope. Those are the kinds of things to test, but you can only test them like once a year. So test something else first. Test major stuff before you worry about the tweaks. This is almost kind of true, unless you're making major mistakes, which they probably aren't at Gunderson. So he means, not the tweaks, but above the tweaks. But the major stuff they probably already know. Okay, address objections. Why don't people buy? Why are they not buying? Always something to think about, right? And sometimes you can answer it, or you can avoid them in the first place. David Ogilvy talks about in his book, Confessions of an Ad Man. He talks about, if you have kidney stones, read this ad or something. If you have bladder failure, read this ad. And he just says, you'll just rule out the people that don't. It's simple, right? Most people don't buy because they don't have the problem that you're trying to solve. So tell them the problem. And maybe you'll attract the people that do have the problem at least. And you'll rule out the people that don't. I tried that theme with Cartizim when I was working on that campaign. One of the first times they ever tried direct mail, Mary Merrill Dow. And I said, how about this? How about this ad? Cardizem users, read this ad or drop dead. They didn't go for it. It would have been a super hit. Anyway, you still got to get client approval most of the time. Okay, what else are you saying and where? Think about online, and Jeff mentions this down a little bit further. A lot of times you can do a really solid test all the way to EBITDA, ROI in mail, but then you can leverage it into social media and mass media. You can find out what works and move it there. Make sure you do, okay? If it's close, retest. One of the things that this doesn't get into is that you really want to think about why you're testing. Why, right? It's the old observation, hypothesis, then test. Too many mailers over the years I've seen just come up with other things to test. Let's do a red envelope instead of a green one, or instead of a white one, or whatever. Why? Why would you do that? Okay. And if you have an observation, and then you have a hypothesis, and the hypothesis is either confirmed or disconfirmed. Okay, so let's think of a test. Okay, let's test. When I worked for the Billy Graham Association, their type was too small in some of their ads. Got no response at all. Zero response. Zero. It went to, after an 8-point type, it was smaller than that. The body copy was smaller than that. Zero responses. Okay, so the hypothesis was the typeface matters. Okay, now you do an A/B split. You can do that in your magazine ads oftentimes, and you find out. Okay, let's test the exact same creative, exact same ads. We'll do a 9-point and a 7-point. Do enough difference that there is a difference, or maybe a 10-point and a 7-point, and see what happens. Just that. It'll have more white space, the 7-point. It should be more lovely, more calming with the white space. Okay, but I bet it would do 0. Okay, and then you've confirmed it, and then you can extrapolate it. Otherwise, all you know is that ad with the smaller type seemed to do worse. But if you can extrapolate it, then you never do 7-point type again. Not until you get a new CMO. That's what happens. Okay, yeah. Test digital integration. I recommend you test backwards. There's a way to fast test, as I mentioned, in digital. Then you take that as the observation and you extrapolate that hypothesis and experiment against it. And then when you prove it for real with mail, then you go back and reformulate your key benefits, your headline, and etc. The other thing that isn't in here is when we were testing creative, that was always secondary. The main thing we tested, and it is in here, I remember, because it says look into segments on the back end. List is the biggest factor. If you send beard conditioning to, well, you might sell a few. If you sell it to wives, send it to wives who don't like their husband's scratchy beard. You might get a few. You never know. One of the big breakthroughs for Victoria's Secret was that they sort of accidentally mailed it to men at their office, and that got a big hit. That was a big hit. That was a breakthrough. This is years back, when nobody knew who they were. And Sports Illustrated once did a commercial on Saturday morning television cartoons. And that was a big hit because the dad didn't care about watching the cartoons. He was just up with the kids so mom could sleep. And, if you put the ad in the middle of a big football game, nobody wants to leave to go order their Sports Illustrated. And by the time the game's over, everybody's forgotten it. But in Saturday morning cartoons, the dad would get up, go over to the phone and say, oh, yeah, I'd like to get Sports Illustrated, which they've been sending me lately. I don't know. I didn't subscribe. I don't know why. Gentleman's Quarterly, Sports Illustrated, a bunch of them are coming all of a sudden to my office. I have no idea. Anyway, so think about the list. Yeah, you can sometimes make mistakes, and actually they work really well. We once mailed a specialty catalog to amusement park business. It did great, but they didn't pay. Back when we had open account. Anyway, so list is the first, and then you get to creative, and you can do two-dimensional testing at the same time if you know what you're doing. And again, if you want to talk about it, give me a call. My phone number is scrolling below. Have a great day. Like and share. This was a little bit long, but it was a masterclass from Jeff Tarran and John Miglosh.